Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you're having a lovely day. Today I would like to read a post that a lot of you have been emailing me and looking for my response on. I was in Canada for LTX, so I wasn't able to make a video because I was busy with a very long line of people that wanted an autograph or a picture, so I wasn't able to respond to this, but I'd love to respond to it now. This comes from a genius level engineer that I have nothing but the most highest level of respect for, Hector Martin. He's responsible for why it is on some of the newer Apple Silicon-based Macs, you're able to run Linux on them, and he has an excellent understanding of these devices. I have a high level of respect for what he's able to accomplish, and I have a high level of respect for what he's done for the community. He's a really good engineer. So I'd like to read his post, and I'd like to give you my thoughts. Okay, right to repair folks. Can you please stop implying that Apple is deliberately sabotaging repair every time you run into a calibration problem? You are seriously embarrassing yourselves and making it impossible for me to support your narrative. Yes, Apple have had some instances of deliberate parts pairing, often with at least some justification, like security for Face and Touch ID stuff. They also have increasingly detailed per device and per part calibration. Their attention to detail and quality is not a myth. Please stop pretending like some evil engineer at Apple put in a deliberate sabotage that makes things work badly when you swap random parts. That is completely ridiculous and absolutely not how any of this works. Deliberate pairing makes things stop working, like the aforementioned Face/Touch ID case, or throw up errors and warnings. If stuff is working just badly, that's not pairing, that is calibration. You have swapped a part that relies on calibration stored on another part, and with the mismatched calibration, the part won't function to original standards. I cringe every time I hear stuff like Apple are anti-repair and pairing their Mac screens so that if you swap them, the backlight is uneven, or Apple are anti-repair and pairing their iPad screens so if you swap them, your Apple Pencil doesn't draw straight lines anymore. You need to stop pushing these ridiculous conspiracy theories and instead focus on reality. These machines are complex. Their production is complex. Their repair is complex, and just swapping parts around willy-nilly may not result in a quality result. And that is normal. Advocate for Apple to provide access to their recalibration, reprovisioning processes instead, so you can actually get things set up properly and working as intended by the manufacturer. Them not providing these tools sucks and is anti-repair. The product engineering that requires these tools for a proper outcome is not. And accept the fact that for some of the stuff you want to do, you're never going to get OEM quality results, because that's just not how it goes. If Apple's brand new screen replacement process involves loading factory calibrated backlight uniformity data from a central database, and aging information is only stored locally on device, and you swap a screen with a used one and don't have the aging information anymore to transfer over, tough luck. You are running into complex engineering your repair process can't deal with, and Apple can't help you with. Not anti-repair. One of the things I think is really important to go over here is that this is actually something that Apple could help with. They could make the calibration tool available. They could make the documentation that says, hey, by the way, this requires calibration or changing over of this chip available, so that the independent repair center doesn't have to guess which chip on the motherboard they don't have a schematic to must be swapped over in order to retain functionality to something. And also, cut it off with the random ideas like similar parts not working across different machines is deliberate pairing. I've heard that one about M1 and M2 Mac trackpads. Of course, those are not swappable. They move the entire controller on die for M2, and if they're even truly physical identically at all, they run wildly different onboard firmware. That's not pairing, and claiming it is just means you have no idea how these things work. Now, a lot of people are responding to him in a negative way, and I think a lot of the responses to him that are negative are actually unfair. A lot of the responses are saying things like, this is way too much text, I'm not reading this, and there are other responses that are saying, well, if Apple's really not anti-repair, then why did they do this anti-repair thing, or why don't they make this thing available, or why don't they help the consumer? Hector makes a very good point here. Apple is not providing the tools or calibration routines necessary to properly fix their devices, and he says very clearly that this is anti-repair and that sucks. On that point, we are in complete agreement. So why is there so much of a pushback? And more importantly, why are there so many people that don't seem to be actually reading what it is that he is saying? I am going to take the guess, and this is just a guess, that the reason people are mad is because in spite of all of the anti-repair stuff that Apple has done over the past 10 years, he is choosing to nitpick calibration versus pairing/serialization and really hone in on that to be mad at people on the right to repair side, in spite of the fact that we, in many cases, don't actually have the necessary documentation, schematics, and so on and so forth to even understand why these devices are not working. And more importantly, at the end of the day, regardless of why it is that we are not able to do that repair, it doesn't really make a difference to ourselves or to the customers who actually want to fix these products themselves or choose an independent of their choice to do it for them. And above all, I think there may be just a little bit of misunderstanding as to why it is the independent repair community has the level of distrust that they have towards Apple, which is what I'd like to address in this video. Because I genuinely do want to actually build a bridge between genius level engineers that can actually explain why things are done the way they are and the people that want to be able to fix their own stuff. I don't want people like this to be seen in any way, shape, or form as an enemy of the independent repair community. The work that he does to get Linux working on these Macs is amazing. The level of knowledge that he and his friends and his peer group have is amazing. This is top 0.1% engineering top brass, and I mean that. And I genuinely agree with what he is saying here. We should get these things right. And I'm going to go over why we don't always get these things right in this video. The distrust that we have as independent repair shops for Apple, at least for me, really started about 8.5 years ago when I was showing up at my state legislature to talk about the right to repair bill. As I mentioned in this video that I did over 8 years ago, I went to speak to my local legislator about right to repair, and he said that he had somebody that was representing Apple as a lobbyist come see him. And the person said something along the lines of, in one of my videos, when I replace a chip or I run a jumper wire, I replace a fuse, I am taking a MacBook motherboard and I am converting it to a PC motherboard. But then when I give that back to my customer, I'm pretending that it is still a MacBook motherboard when I have actually converted it into a PC motherboard, and this is fraud. This is why right to repair is bad. This is why what Lewis does is bad. And this is why you should be against what he stands for. As you can imagine, my head turned red while I was in the room that day, and that is why I chose to not only record every single conversation I have with a lobbyist, but also every single hearing that I attend. From that day on, I was never in a room with a politician where I wasn't recording, because that was the biggest pile of garbage I had ever heard in my entire life. Much of what caused this channel to blow up and become as popular as it did were the videos that I would do where I would record either industry lobbyists making things up that are full of shit, or just recording the politicians' responses to lobbyists making things up who are full of shit. It really hurt the level of trust that we had with companies like Apple, which admittedly wasn't a lot at that point as it is. Another example would be something like Error 53, where Apple chose to throw independent repair shops under the bus for something that was their fault. I will link to a very long Reddit post that I made a long time ago in the description for anybody who's interested. The TLDR of this is that with the iPhone 5S, there was a really large scandal called Error 53. The phone would stop working after an update and flash Error 53. And when you took it to the Apple Store, somebody at the Apple Store will said, you must have repaired it improperly. You went to an independent instead of going to us, and as a result of that, your phone is broken. Because they either broke it or, well, this is a security feature. They were explaining this as a security feature to protect customer security. In reality, it was actually a manufacturing bug. This was never the independent breaking your phone. Nor did this in any way, shape, or form enhance the security of your iPhone. In fact, it had so little to do with enhancing the security of your iPhone that by the time they were sued over this, they got rid of it altogether. You can still have that knockoff home button in your phone or that non-original home button in your phone without calibration, without there being any security issue, because they went over it right here. There is a very easy way to remove this bug from your phone. Apple didn't say it was a bug, they said it was a security feature, and if you brought a phone to the Apple Store that had Error 53, they would charge you $300 to swap it for another one and claim that an independent repair center must have done something improper to your phone. Not only did the repair center not know exactly what was going on, Apple didn't know what was going on because what they were telling journalists didn't even match up with what the engineers were actually doing. This was a bug. All they had to do is tap the engineer on the shoulder and ask what was going on, and they would have said, oh, my bad, I'm sorry. That's supposed to be there from the manufacturing process. That code is not actually supposed to be there when it makes its way to customers. That's there so that if the phone is mismatched with the home button, that phone never makes its way into a box and goes to a consumer. But that code is not supposed to be run on customer phones. That's not a safety feature. That was something that we left in by mistake. I'm sorry, we'll take it out. Apple's internal company culture is so bad when it comes to communication between departments that Apple themselves cannot accurately explain to customers or journalists how basic security features in their phone work, or explain that this is not even a security feature at all but a bug. If Apple cannot properly explain to a journalist how a security feature works in their device, then how is an independent supposed to when they don't have access to Apple's engineering department? Because the people that commented on this to the news, they were able to call the engineering department. They could have written an internal email and asked, hey, what is this for? What does this mean? And they never did that. How is it that we're holding an independent repair technician that is grasping at straws on a new device that doesn't have schematics available to try and figure out how it works to a greater standard than we are holding Apple to? Do you understand why I may be a little bit forgiving on this guy, even if he doesn't necessarily understand why, when he told Forbes the iPad was working this way, that it was working that way? If the whole idea was to disable your phone when a part was attached to the phone that was an OEM, then why would you wait for the phone to do an update? So if I have a part attached to my phone that you could use to hack into my phone, why would you wait 8 months until I install an iOS update to disable the phone rather than doing it immediately? And also, when it comes to the fingerprint sensor was not hot swappable. It wasn't like a USB-C device. You actually had to restart the phone in order for it to work. And when you restart the phone, the fingerprint sensor wouldn't work. It would require that you enter your passcode. So to claim that this was ever done for security was absolutely and utterly ridiculous. And in my opinion, as I mentioned in this Reddit post, I imagine this was somebody from Apple PR running their mouth off before they had any idea. And Apple's default in that instance was to blame the independent repair shops that worked on these phones, and it was also to claim that this was a security feature that was designed to protect the user, when in reality it had nothing to do with protecting the user and it had nothing to do with security. Strike two. You can kind of understand how even 8 years ago, the trust between repair shops and Apple is really at an all-time low. They still lie to journalists and they lie to their customers. The reason I call it a lie when Apple does it and I don't call it a lie when this independent does it is because Apple actually has access to how that phone is designed. They can walk over to the engineer that put together that phone and ask what error 53 is and why it exists. This person can't. I have a higher standard for the person that works at Apple when explaining to journalists and customers why their phone has a random error code that is going to cost the customer $300 than I do this random dude that works at an unauthorized phone repair shop that is trying to figure out how to fix the device with no support. Marcan's point about accuracy when talking about these things is a valid one. I agree with him. But if Apple can't get it right, then how can I expect this dude to get it right?
Come on, man.
I don't want a strain of anti-engineer sentiment and anti-intellectualism poisoning the right to repair movement. I want people to have a real, genuine desire to understand how these devices are put together. I want to see that. But it's also important to point out that there is a reason that we don't know how these devices are put together. He may have been wrong about the why, pairing/serialization versus calibration, but he's right about the end result. If you don't have a soldering iron, you're not going to be able to do that repair properly. And at the end of the day, the person who's doing this has to guess which chip it is they need to transfer from the old screen to the new because there's no documentation, which will result in less people doing that repair, more people frustrated when the repair device doesn't work properly, more people going to Apple for repairs, or more people buying a new one. And this comes back to a point I make in many of my videos. If you make an oopsie or a mistake, and that oopsie or mistake just so happens to make you more money, and you ignore it for a very long period of time, is it really an oopsie anymore? Am I allowed to speculate with your history of lying to legislators, your history of lying to journalists, your history of lying to customers, all when it comes to the topic of repair, that maybe these engineering decisions that just so happen to always cut against repairability might be done maliciously? I'm not saying they are in every sense, but can you understand where we're coming from? He brings up an example of why that engineering decision may have been made. He also brings up the fact that the person who made that engineering decision is likely not the person that also made the decision that that calibration tool will not be made available to the customer. Point taken. Once you get to the point where it is no longer me with 50 subscribers discussing this issue, but I have over 1 million subscribers, I've gotten fundraised over $2 million to try and lobby on behalf of right to repair legislation across America. I've gotten the ear of the president. We have like a movement with tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of people that are kind of asking for their devices to be more fixable. It's really hard to imagine that you can't have this person speak to that person so that this is a repair that can actually be done in a little bit of an easier manner. Yeah, he brought up a reason why they don't put that information on the device, why that calibration information is stored on the screen rather than the device. That was still an engineering decision that had to be made. And if 10 years into the right to repair movement, you're still making those engineering decisions in an isolated manner, not taking into consideration in any way, shape, or form how this device is going to be practically serviced in the real world when you have the amount and level of resources that Apple does, whether this is one department disagreeing with another department, 2 or 4 departments that are not talking to one another, or an actual malicious engineering decision, the actual impact to the end user and the independent repair community is identical. And the impact of Apple's bottom line is identical and undeniable. And at some point, we stop caring about the potential internal conflicts of a company that doesn't even communicate with its own PR department about how its devices are put together from a security perspective, much less us. Can I say the quiet part out loud? It doesn't make a difference to me. It means the same thing. It means that the end user is going to try to fix this product and have a bad result. It means that a repair shop is going to try to fix this product and have a bad result. And both of those end up the exact same way. The customer goes to buy a new one. The customer is discouraged to go to repair outside of Apple. Apple makes more money. When it comes to how Apple was dealing with a lot of things relating to repairability, there used to be diagnostic suites that came with this machine. You could hold on, like, I think Apple D or something else when you turn the machine on, and it would tell you error codes. It would tell you when sensors failed. And then around 2014-15, they stopped doing that. And when you would run that same thing, it would come up with this, which I show in this 8-year-old video. Apple uses Spite to force planned obsolescence. It would give you an error code that told you to contact Apple or take your computer to an Apple store. If you actually wanted to get access to the error codes that used to be available to the end user very easily, you now had to connect to something called GSX. You would have to connect to Apple servers, you would have to be an Apple authorized repair center, and above all, the funniest part of this meme is that the people who get access to GSX are not the people that are actually allowed to fix motherboards to begin with. So the people who get access to the diagnostic software that will give you access to error codes and everything else are the people who are not allowed to do board repair. The people who are allowed to do board repair because they're not Apple authorized don't have access to the error codes. A true comedy, but a decision that somebody had to be involved in actively making. One of many, one of hundreds over the past several years that has been made willingly to make our lives more difficult. Which is why when people speak to the news, when the new device just so happens to be more difficult to repair in a way that doesn't make sense to us because it was never communicated to us, assumes the worst. Rather than telling you it was wrong or giving you any sort of idea, the diagnostics were truncated. Again, these things are not done in a vacuum. These are decisions that people have to make. And above all, the real part here that I think is really important to understand is when asking why it is that an independent doesn't know the difference between serialization and pairing, we don't get to communicate with Apple. One of the things that I've asked for on this channel many, many times, schematics. What is the thing that it said on my t-shirts that I was selling on my website for 8 years? Schematics or die. We would like nothing more than to have access to detailed manuals and schematics that we actually understand how these products work. Because when these new products come out, can I be honest with you all? We're guessing. I have no idea how this works. When Apple flipped the backlight circuit upside down from the 820-3476 to the 820-4924, do you know how I figured that out? Yeah, the hard way. When a new device comes out, we are, for the most part, guessing because there is no information available. Apple doesn't make schematics and diagrams available. Apple doesn't make diagnostic information available. And Apple doesn't make this stuff available to their own repair shops. As I've gone over in this video, which is also about 8 years old, what does authorized repair do? Let's find out. I spent about an hour calling all different types of authorized repair shops asking very basic questions about their products. They told me that on an iPhone 6, the charge port is soldered to the motherboard. If an Apple authorized repair shop is given so little information on how these products work that they think the charge port is soldered to the motherboard, how is an independent repair technician that has less access to Apple schematics, diagrams, everything else than we do, supposed to understand on a brand new iPad why the pencil isn't working? When you change the screen, and the screen stops working properly, even when it's an OEM part, but it works when you transfer a chip over, yes, it could be a calibration issue. It could be a part serialization issue. We don't know. And we would love to know. And one of the ways that we would know is an open line of communication, which is what we've been asking for over a decade. That's something that is not available to us and is not available to the people who are actually authorized to work on the product. And one of the things that I've said time and time again is I don't believe it is malice when it is one time. I don't believe it is malice the first time that you point out that somebody has done something that is wrong. But I believe that it becomes malice, and I start to assume the worst when that mistake, when that accident, when that whoopsie just so happens to repeat itself 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 1,000,000 times. And one of the things I think is really important to point out here, again, another point where can I be brutally honest with all of you? I'm not very smart. I'm really not a smart dude. I barely graduated high school. I failed freshman chemistry and pre-calculus in college. I'm not that smart. The reason that I was able to print money hand over fist back in the day doing what I do is because the Genius Bar is fundamentally bad at their job. They are very bad. They have tried to charge customers over $300 because a battery was not plugged into the computer. Here, you have an issue where the screen cable had a single bent pin, and Apple wanted something along the lines of $2,000 to fix this computer, which, best case scenario, you bend the pin back. Worst case scenario, price-wise, you replace the screen cable. When this happens once, twice, 10, 100 times, it's a whoopsie. When it happens 1,000 times, 10,000 times, if I have my foot over here, and there's a floorboard that's kind of wonky in my house, and somebody walks over and goes to step on the floorboard to put it back into place, and I go, ow, my foot was there. The first time that happens, it wasn't because they wanted to hurt me. The second time it happens, maybe they forgot. The 100th time that person steps on my foot because they want to flatten that floorboard and I say, hey man, you know, my foot was there. In absence of an explanation, an absence of any sort of open line of communication, people start to assume the worst. Do I understand Marcan's point that technically speaking, there may be a proper reason, that may be calibration, not serialization, that is resulting in that iPad not having a working pencil? Absolutely. And as an engineer, I understand his frustration. At the same time, can I also say that I'm not going to throw the person who said that under the bus for making that assumption, given that he has no communication with the manufacturer, that he will be denied schematics from the manufacturer, he will be denied any information from the manufacturer that will allow him to confirm how that product works so that he can fix it for his customer, or at the very least, understand what's going on so that when he speaks to the media, he can speak the truth. Yeah, I'm not throwing that guy under the bus. I'm not. If Apple wanted people to truthfully speak to the media about how their products work, then they would not go above and beyond to hide information from the people that want to do well by their customers, that want to fix their products and do a good job. As I said in this video I did 2 weeks ago, an honest message to Apple Inc. At the end of the day, I would be more than happy to put aside all of the salt. I would be more than happy to put aside all of the aggravation, all of the bad blood and all of this stuff, if we could just get access to the most basic tools, the most basic schematics, the most basic diagrams, and pay for them so that we can make your customers happy. So that the customers that you don't want to service because it's too much of a pain in the ass, it's too complicated, too in-depth, we can do that for you so that your customers will have a good experience with your products. In order for us to be able to have a real honest conversation when we speak to the media, we need that information. And what we've been advocating for from day one is to have access to that information. I don't like guessing. I don't like the fact that when a new product comes out, I have to buy a bunch of them and mess with it and screw with it and stay up until 3 a.m. for a couple of months at a time to figure out how everything works before I figure it out. It would be great to not have to do that, but that's not the world that we live in. And when it comes to assuming the worst, a lot of us do assume the worst. And I am more than happy to correct myself anytime I am proven wrong. But I can't throw this guy into the bus for assuming the worst. I can't, because time and time again, that is what has happened. On this channel, when I have not assumed the worst, when I have thanked Apple, when I have made videos like this, congratulations, Apple, for doing a good thing. Thank you, Apple, turning over a new leaf because they released an independent repair program. I figured out that that program is complete bullshit, which I went over here. That program was designed from the ground up to be fundamentally useless. That program would not allow me to do a single thing more than what I can do right now for my customers. I would like nothing more than when somebody calls me, a journalist calls me and says, Lewis, what do you think of the fact that the new Apple product that came out is not user repairable, where when you replace a part, even if you replace with an OEM, that part doesn't work properly? And I would love to be able to say, well, very simple, Jane. The reason that is because you need this calibration tool. However, when you go to support.apple.com/fixit, you're able to download that calibration tool and it works. And they also give you a little manual on how everything is put together. And if you don't believe me, which you shouldn't believe me, I'm a random dude wearing the same blue shirt every day for the last 5 years in a dirty lounge chair. What you can do is you could check out the schematics on support.apple.com/fixit/diagrams, where you could see exactly how the device works so that none of us are speculating. I would kill for a world where we were that collaborative with one another. I would love to live in that world. I would love to live in a world where Marcan doesn't have to guess why the device was designed in that way when trying to disprove the person who spoke to the media, but rather he can create specific citations based on all the documentation on the product that's made available so that everybody, the user, the repair shop, and the manufacturer, can all bask in enjoyment of more sustainable, more friendly, and more secure devices. That is not the world we live in, and something tells me that's not going to be the world we live in for a very long time. But I welcome that world. I am open to that world, and I do not want to see right to repair become overcome with anti-engineering, anti-intellectualism sentiment from people that don't understand how things are put together. I understand your frustration meeting Marcan's post, because in a way it can be read that he's nitpicking somebody talking about serialization versus calibration, when at the end of the day that is a very small detail about an issue that is far bigger than that. I get it. But I also have to understand Marcan's point. We have to respect this point, because at the end of the day, he's right. We should be right when we talk about this stuff, and we should seek to be right when we talk about this stuff. And we should include engineers that are at his level in these conversations so that when we discuss these things, we sound smarter. Can anybody deny that, like, we could use help sounding smarter? At least me. At least me. Shit, I got a watch that's supposed to be able to count my steps. I can't even figure out how to turn it on. I could use all the help I can get. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And if you made it all the way through this half-hour-long video, thank you. Do you think he has a point? Do you think I have a point? Do you think we both have a point? Do you think none of us have a point? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't type this BS. Don't type this just don't buy Apple shit. Because if there's anything I've shown you over the past 10 years on this channel, everything that they do winds up coming to another manufacturer down the line. If you want to be proud of a sense of ownership over the products that you purchase, fight the battle when it comes to Apple, because down the road, it's going to come to you. That's it for today, and as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now. If you look in the links down below, you will see merchandise that you can buy if you like or want to support this channel. I don't expect it to sell as well as Linus's. I went to LTX for 16 hours. This guy had a line doing literally this to buy hoodies, backpacks, screwdrivers, and everything else. That dude is the Henry Ford of YouTube. God bless him. If I got like 0.01% the merchandise sales that dude did, I'd probably buy Apple. Probably not going to happen anytime soon. Anyway, that's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now. And tell Marcan we said hi. He's doing good work. Getting Linux to work on the M1 and M2 Macs, that's not an easy task. He's doing it. He's putting his money where his mouth is, and he's putting his time where his mouth is.